Hello, everybody. Welcome to Anderson Ranch and our summer faculty lecture series. I'm Betsy Alwyn. I'm the visiting director of Ceramics and Expanded Media, and I'll be introducing our speakers tonight. Before we begin, I just want to remind you to please silence your cell phones. I'm going to do that too, because I'm trying to be a good influence. I also want to start by recognizing that the Anderson Ranch campus resides on the historic tribal lands of the Ute people who called this area home for over 800 years. In honor of this legacy, we focus on building an inclusive community here, maintaining this as a place for inspiration and creativity in the center of the Rocky Mountains. I also want to remind everyone to please come to attend the ranch-wide orientation right here in this room tomorrow at 8:45. Oh, and if you're in a 2-week workshop and you've already been here for 1 week, you don't have to come. Tonight's program will consist of 2 faculty lectures followed by a brief Q&A. First, I would like to introduce our very own Esther Macy Nooner. Esther received her MFA in studio art from the University of Arkansas School of Art. She has participated in the Artist in Residence program in the National Park System and at the Buren College of Art in Ballyvaughan, Ireland. She has shown work nationally and internationally and is currently the studio coordinator for photography and new media at Anderson Ranch Arts Center, which is here. Please help me welcome Esther to the stage.
I really hope I deliver on those expectations. Hello, everyone. Like it's been said numerous times, this is my name, Esther. I have been here at the ranch for about 5 years and 1 month, but who's counting, right? I am the studio coordinator for photo and new media, and then I also have additional title, and I help oversee programming for all workshops here at the ranch. So I want to start off by showing this image of, this is my family farm in Arkansas. I grew up spending summers here. It was really like a safe haven for me. I kind of knew the entire place like the back of my hand. I was free to roam and kind of do whatever I needed to do as a kid, be dirty all the time, and that kind of thing gave me a real appreciation for home and place. And when my grandfather was in his 90s, he lived to be about 94. We were sitting in the sunroom and we were looking at this view, and we were talking about something that needed to be done on the farm, and he said, well, that's okay, I'll just leave it for the next generation. And he was talking about a pile of trash or something like that. And I was like, oh, cool, so that's me. And that statement really sort of struck me as, I don't know, someone who knew he didn't have the physical capabilities to take care of anything anymore, and he was going to leave this land to his children and grandchildren, and that included all of its problems. And so that kind of resonated with me in thinking about landscape and nature and things like that. There's a lot of other things that influence my work, but that's kind of the most influential thing. So in 2018, I graduated with my MFA in studio art from the University of Arkansas. I had this really pivotal trip. I was very fortunate to go to Iceland for a few weeks and photograph around the country, and I was really struck by how they treated their landscape very differently compared to Americans, like the American West, and you know how Americans are also very property-driven and hardcore fences, and in Iceland they were very welcoming and there were no fences. They actually called that visual pollution because they didn't like that. They have no electric lines or anything like that. So it really kind of struck me, and then I came back from that trip right before, kind of in the middle of my second year, and it really shifted my practice quite a bit. So my work is really photo-based. I really think about the photograph as an object rather than this portal into another place. In the 70s, there was an exhibition, and John Sarkowski wrote about windows and mirrors and how images really reflect either something of ourselves or this portal into another place. And I really wanted to break that ideology that was sort of attached to photography in general, and then also break this sort of sublime ideas around landscape imagery as well. So this is my thesis show. Some pieces that I'll just kind of go through. This was this really beautiful landscape, and I wanted to really like kind of reject the most beautiful part of the image from the viewer, and so I just cut a big fat rectangle in the middle of it. And it's printed on vinyl. It's stuck right to the gallery wall, so your view is kind of interrupted by the physical space itself, kind of treating it again as an object. And this piece is also kind of like a one-time use, because once you take it off the wall, you can't really show it again, kind of lending itself to the idea of the things that we use one time and then just kind of throw away when we're done. Just some details of it. I really enjoy playing around with the fundamentals of photography, which are light and time. This piece was just, this image of sand that I had, and I just kind of cut a slit in it and then adhered it to a light box, and I really wanted like all the artificial things to be shown. So the light, obviously, and then the cord coming down from the light box itself, and then light coming through the paper. So again, using material, thinking about the image as an object in itself. An overlook, which is something you might see in a national park, or you pull off, the side of the road, and you have this really grand view. And again, I wanted to break that expectation of the viewer, and so I cut it up into strips and kind of layered them on top of each other. Again, just making it more about the texture and the color and the object on the gallery wall. I was, like Betsy said in my introduction, I was an artist in residence at a national park. It's a very small park in Hot Springs, Arkansas, which it was actually one of the first land that was protected by federal government in 1832. And I was there for 2 weeks, and I was really able to walk the same paths every day, which was kind of new for me. And so I took this image of water, and then I put the photograph back in the water where it was, like where I took it. And then I just kind of made this GIF of it, and it sat on the gallery floor. And then again, the paper just kind of just like disintegrated in my hands. But I was kind of thinking about how an image represents a space, and how sometimes that image doesn't really look like the space you actually standing in. So just again, thinking of the image as the object, thinking of it as something as artificial. So I had this beautiful sky, and then I fragmented it up, and then I put like pink paper behind it so it radiated off the wall. And again, you're thinking about a gallery space and using the corner of a place that may not be activated as much as in a traditional photography gallery might do. Detail of that. And then this rock collection, I really enjoyed making this piece. Sort of a fundamental element of photography is reproduction, and you can make as many prints of one thing as you want to, or if you print an edition, etc. But I really enjoyed thinking of like a kid and their rock collection, and how everyone has these like little objects that they hold precious, and how we do that with family photos and things like that. So I essentially, I had a framed rock, and then I CNC cut out this big rock, and the image was on it. And then I Xerox copied 1,000 rocks of the same thing. And as part of the gallery, or part of the show, viewers could take one, again, as like this participatory action of, we all sort of participate in the human relationship to nature, good and bad. So just some more installation views. This was like a series within my thesis show, Geometric Landscapes. I had these really beautiful prints, and I kind of just wanted to keep pushing them further, so I laser cut shapes out of them, and then like formed the actual object, and then I placed the object back onto the image and then rephotographed it. Again, just sort of like disrupting what you might expect you would see in a beautiful image, and then kind of having this thought like, oh, why is that there? Or someone's manipulated this in some way, which are thoughts I often have in the landscape, like hiking. I'm like, oh, there's a piece of plastic. Like, how the hell did that get here? Well, humans did that. if you didn't know. Um, so again, just more of these. I did a series of 10. I think I showed like 4 of them. But their beauty is also really important to me in my work. I think that a lot of people and artists in general tend to think of talking about human relationships to nature and showing like really I don't know, graphic things or, like landfills or trash and things like that. And I think it's really important to think about how beautiful the earth is and kind of use that as an entry point into thinking about our relationship to it. So this was an image that was, again, typically meant to be horizontal, and then I flipped it vertically and then just like scored it and put it on the floor. So definitely, again, using the galleries and the gallery space, and then thinking about the image and kind of dividing it in ways that you wouldn't expect. And the last piece from this show was I essentially had this image that I recorded going in and out of focus. And so only for a split second could you see what it was. And then it just became this like really beautiful color field. And it was kind of like using this like really simple fundament of photography going in and out of focus, which is, a pretty important piece of making an image. So yeah. Then the next body of work I'll show was made right here at the ranch. I showed it about 1.5 years ago. Again, the core of my work is really showing using the image as an object and kind of the metaphorical approach of human relationships to nature. And I wanted to manipulate the ink on paper in some different way, so I just started using household chemicals and seeing what would happen with the images and how the ink would react on paper. At first, when I started doing this, I tried really harsh like acids and stuff like that, and it didn't really do anything. So then I just tried straight up Windex, and it worked beautifully. So you never know. This was Windex sprayed on the image, and it just ran so beautifully. And just kind of thinking about all the things that we have access to and that we use every day, and how they affect the places that we visit, or our national parks, or even our backyard. This was maroon bells. I removed the bells with a Clorox wipe. I've had many people say that they would never recognize that space without the bells there, which I think is pretty interesting because it's also the photographed mountain in the country, I believe. So if you remove like the most important thing and then no one recognizes it or what it is, I think is a really interesting thing to think about. Denatured alcohol, I just smeared it all over there, and then it kind of became this weird abstract painting almost. Oh, sorry, those are out of order. Bleach, these inkjet papers really have this very intense coating on top, and how they react with chemicals is really quite interesting. If you want to try it, don't do it inside, just a pro tip. This was one of my favorites, most satisfying, which is toilet bowl cleaner. It had a really beautiful thickness and viscosity that just allowed the ink to drip down in such a consistent way. And I found it incredibly satisfying. Even as simple as like sanding the image and removing the Olympic National Park, removing the landscape. Just kind of really thinking about what nature will look like in, 50 plus years, I think is a question I think about a lot in my studio. Just a detail of that, more installation shots. Shout out to Carbondale. They have a really great art scene. They show a lot of great work there, so if you're local, please check them out. Bleach, laundry detergent, and even the two far ones, the Kansas and that's the same chemistry, but they just reacted so differently, which I also think is pretty interesting. So then in 2021, I was able to go to Byrne College of Art, which is this really small, beautiful college that is mostly artists and artists who are also thinking about ecology in their making. And so I got to go there for a month, and all I did Here they are. They actually have a castle. It's on like a historical marker, and you can go up in the castle. It's pretty cool. But all I did was walk all day, every day. And I, again, was just like walking the same paths every day and kind of finding all of these different, I don't know, like tiny little morsels of nature that I wouldn't have even have considered if I hadn't walked or had repeated the walk every day, which I think is really interesting. And I kind of decided that I wanted to take portraits of nature and have a little more of an intimate view compared to the vastness of the American West. And so I really just kind of like stayed really close to everything that I was photographing, and it really was quite different. And again, the Irish landscape and the people there were so different. They were, here I would be terrified to cross someone's fence and walk into someone else's property, but they were so welcoming and were absolutely like, oh, please come see my sheep. So it was a very different experience, which I think is what kind of like the main thing that I take away from this residency was continuing, to see how other people think about nature. Compared to like the national park systems and things like that. So I really enjoyed my time there. If anyone's interested in going to Ireland, it's a great residency and they're very welcoming. And I highly encourage you to consider it. Again, I got really close and it's so green and beautiful. I also love photographing clouds. I really love photographing anything that is everywhere, like rocks and sand and clouds. And it's like this universal thing that we all look at and we all find beautiful. Yeah. Again, playing with focus, like just completely not even paying attention to this, like what technically is a good photograph, but just kind of thinking about color fields and what is like it as an object itself. Anyway, I would walk all day and then I would go in the studio at night and print. And then I started like making these weird collages of like rocks from Utah and sand from California and then, sky from Ireland, whatever. And I just, again, like what if all of these things just like mesh together and form this like really beautiful object that kind of doesn't make any sense. So then I've like in the last year, I've been back in my studio and I've kind of felt like I've been in a little bit of a rut. So I'm going to show like 5 things that I've made, and if they never see the light of day again, other than the people in this room, that's okay. Maybe I'll throw them away tomorrow. I don't know. But I kind of came back and I had all these images and I was thinking about like how combining all of the sky and all of the water and what does it look like if it's only sky, or I don't know. I just started to really mess around. And none of these are obviously in the most complete form, but I think that some of the sort of explorations of like continuing thinking about it as an object and like removing rocks one by one, or like making the background instead of having something that's really photographic. I think that, all those are things I just like play around with. My studio practice is 100% about play and experimenting. And sometimes if you come in my studio, everything will be on the floor and you can step on it. That's okay. I don't ever treat it in the most precious of ways, because I think that's also like a false, idea that, that the landscape and this representation is so precious, when really it's fragile, I guess you could say. And I didn't mean for these to be so dark and like dreary, but they kind of are. Again, really love clouds. I think that they're just so beautiful and different, and everyone all around the world enjoys them the same. So, just gonna come full circle. One thing that I really love about photography and why I really fell in love with it was being in the darkroom. And so when I feel like I'm in a rut, I kind of go back there. And so one thing that I've constantly made sort of throughout my artistic practice is cyanotypes. And I've made them in a plethora of different ways. I made these in like the next four. I took coated paper out to the ocean and I just like smeared sand over it, and then I let them sit, and then I developed them in the ocean. And the salt with the chemistry kind of made some cool crystallized, parts of the image. And I really just enjoy this process. And it's very approachable. You just need water. And so it's really easy to make things in a quick way to sort of get back in the habit of making. And I made these in grad school. And then I think since I've been here, I think every year I've made one, even just like small 9x12 from snow. And so this is just a coated paper. I take it out and I let the snow melt on top, and then it develops itself outside. And you just get these really amazing textures and tones. This one I don't even think I developed. It just keeps changing over time. It gets darker and darker. So that's really my caveat into the staff show that's coming up. The artistic staff, we're here in the summer facilitating workshops for everyone, and then we really try to maintain our practice here in the winter months. And so I decided to go back to what I love the most, and I made a small series of cyanotypes that are in the gallery. So if you're local and you're here on the 18th of June, please come to the reception and celebrate with us. And that's it.
Thank you, Esther. It's nice actually to be in a place that supports all artistic staff, our artists, and Anderson Ranch supports our practices, which is really nice. Our next speaker is Yashua Klos. And I met Yashua actually at Skowhegan, I don't want to say how many years ago. Actually, compared to the universe age, it's like yesterday. So Yashua explores themes of identity, memory, and African Americans' relationship to American labor in his multimedia practice. His large-scale works are created from the intricate formations of woodblock prints, representing ideas of blackness through multidimensional, fragmented portraits. He received an MFA from Hunter College. Recent exhibitions include a major solo exhibition, Yashua Klos, Our Labor, at the Wellen Museum of Art at Hamilton College, Clinton, New York, curated by Tracy L. Adler, and Yashua Klos, Our Living, at the Center for Maine Contemporary Art, Rockland, Maine. Please join me in welcoming Yashua to the stage.
Thank you. Wow, I'm so lucky to be here. This is incredible. I already met some of my students in the class. I want to shout them out so bad, but I'm not going to do that yet. It's way too early, and this is about me. So here we go. So yes, I'm Yashua. Two points about me that are reoccurring. You'll see this in the work. Raised on the south side of Chicago, and I'm a teacher. I taught different places, and those are parts of my identity that I think are really important because I see them reemerging often in the things I do. I have to read this as you read it, otherwise it's weird, because if I talk while you read, one thing won't get computed, so I'm just going to read this out loud. Being raised by a single-parent mom as an only child on the south side of Chicago, my work has always been about family. Aren't our ideas of identity constructed in community and built from the materials of our environments? Because I didn't have much family growing up, my friends and neighbors became my siblings, aunts, uncles, and cousins. I understood family as the people who we survive with and the people we survive for. I make images of this family and their resilience. This is me in the studio, kind of surrounded by some of those images of family. So these are friends, and I'm making collage portraits. The collages are based in woodblock printing, and I'll get to that, but what I'm doing is making a mess, as you can see, and that's really what I do well. I like to make a lot of resource material for these collages, and then I cut up and reassemble them. I'm sort of like a sculptor building from the inside out. And what I mean by that is that I kind of see these works in 3 dimensions, though I'm building them in 2 dimensions. I'm trying to activate a kind of illusionistic space and depth in the work. So I'm kind of thinking as if I were a sculptor building from these components, and I had 2x4s and bricks, how these elements would be arranged. And of course, ultimately, these are all made out of paper. I'm trying to find any possible way that I can draw using printmaking materials. So drawing lays the foundation for the carved line. So of course, I'm drawing on top of these blocks of wood first with a Sharpie, and then I carve out all the negative space. Wood block printing allows me to carve into a block of wood and then print the surface that remains. So it's almost a recording of the kinetic gesture that I'm making with the wood. So I'm carving MDF and linoleum. Why MDF? I use MDF and linoleum because they don't have a wood grain. So those of us who are familiar with like traditional wood block print, of course, there's a whole history in the Eastern tradition especially, of carving into real wood with wood grain. But I'm using MDF, which I prefer because it doesn't have wood grain, doesn't resist the line. I can make these kind of curvilinear gestures and even circular gestures without the wood resisting the carving gouge. Inking allows me to create prints of varied saturation. Everything uncarved remains on the surface of the block to be inked. So again, this is just kind of typical to relief block printing. In some ways, to me, it's very much like drawing. I'm only removing the line instead of adding it, right, with the gouge. I love using hand pressure in printing because it becomes democratic in that way. It's a way of removing the limitations and expectations of the process. Now, what I really mean there is that when I'm hand pressing, using barons and using wooden kitchen spoons, I can vary the pressure that I apply to the block. So unlike rolling it through a print, which would give me sort of a standard pressure dispersed throughout the block, I can go harder in some areas and lighter than in others. Unlike traditional collage, I'm making my own source material. So yeah, that's another image of me in the studio surrounded by all of these source materials. So I'm making a lot of these different swatches, colors, textures, prints, and I don't always know what I'm going to do with them when I make them, but in some ways they just become part of my palette. And I start pulling from that palette and constructing the images along the way. There are times where I know ahead of time what I'm carving and I can prepare that way, but often I'm kind of looking at surveying the floor as a palette and then choosing what works. So this is an example of an image that was predetermined. This is a feather that I carved out of 2 blocks of 8-foot by 4-foot MDF. And right here, I'm not sure what I'm doing with it. That happens a lot, where I'm just looking at my work like, what the hell am I doing? But this is what it turned into. At that time, this was the largest work I had made. I'm going to get to a larger one soon, but this is 16 feet wide and 8 feet large. Was really excited about the idea of woodblock on that scale. We don't often see printmaking happen on that scale. Also a feather, something that obviously we think of as being small and delicate and light. I wanted to see what would happen if I could kind of reverse the expectations of that feather. And here it's also carrying weight. You see it kind of carrying those brick forms. So again, this is back to Chicago. Chicago's urban planning was designed for segregation, to separate black and white. That's baked into the planning and choreography of the city. We talk about Chicago, we talk about it being on a grid, named streets intersecting with numbered streets. In art history, the grid is a kind of tool for optical democracy. There's no visual hierarchy in a grid. You can enter any space at any time. I'm interested in the grid's proposal of democracy and how that's failed black folks given where I'm from and how Chicago is constructed. To some degree, I consider the grid an obstacle that has pressured black people to persist. So the grid for me is also a metaphor. It also relates to the urban planning that's in Chicago and many cities, but Chicago was in many ways a standard for building segregation into a city. So much of my work pays homage to survival tactics. A lot of the heads and faces look like sculptural forms. They suggest that they're built, that they're constructed out of wood, brick, rocks, cinder block. These are the elements of the urban environment. These are the leftover relics after a city is built. Now, I'm also, in this image, I'm starting to explore softer forms that are more organic. This was a rose form. And I went on to really look more at flowers. In some ways, it's a formal challenge, but also conceptually, as I'm starting to challenge ideas about masculinity and about a sort of rigidness that I'm finding in these building materials that I'm using. The thing, and this is about hands. I use a lot of hands in my work, which I can get into again. The thing about the hand in particular that I'm interested in is how do I pay tribute to the invisible labor black folks have done in building this country, and at the same time, undermine expectations of the black body as a body that's designed for labor. So you'll notice that the hand is doing everything except working, even though there's these, oh, I get to use a laser pointer. There's these bricks here that are sort of tumbling away, and the hand is, in fact, larger than life, of course, much larger, bigger than the bricks, and it's much more invested in whatever it's doing with those wildflowers. This is a theme that I continue to explore. This work I haven't seen in a while, I must say. This is kind of older work. This is where it all changes. So this is a screenshot of a Facebook message. Hi, Yashua. My name is Paige White. My family and I, Macy McDonald, recently did an ancestry DNA search under my uncle Timothy Macy McDonald, and you came up as a pretty strong match, either as a cousin or nephew. I would love to see how we could be connected. We have a ton of relatives in Chicago, and you actually favor some of them. Some of the family here in Detroit. I look forward to hearing from you, Best Paige. Now, I responded, but not right away. I actually scooted away from my desk. My head was spinning. I paced back and forth because potentially I was like, this is either a family member I don't know or I know about, but I'm just not connected with, and family, or this is the biggest scam I never heard of in my life. So I had to kind of take some deep breaths and figure out what my position was going to be here. But I responded back. I said, Paige, my dad is a McDonald, Leon. His family was also Macy's. Let's try and connect the dots. This is them. This is my family. I went to Detroit 2 months after getting that message. And this is only a small part. So my dad was one of 15 kids, and they all had kids. So, and I was raised as an only child. So overnight, I became an uncle, nephew, all the things, so many cousins. And I went out to Detroit, and it was amazing. It was a lot of love. In Detroit, there's a museum, the Detroit Institute of Art. Of course, as an art nerd, I had to make that side trip. So I made that side trip to the museum, and I saw this mural, which I had seen in books, in art history books in art class. This is Diego Rivera's Detroit Industry mural, painted in 1933. So this was painted as a commission by the Ford family. You can see the Fords over here scheming. And, oh, there's another one over here. But this is kind of meant to be a portrait at that time of the heartbeat of the American economy, the automobile in Detroit. You notice this is 1933, so it's before women were allowed in the factory and before black people were allowed to work in the factory. That changed very soon after as black folks migrated, like my family, from Memphis to Detroit for those jobs. So when I saw that mural, I was blown away. I loved the mural. It was like a Sistine Chapel moment. It was like committed to industry. And then at the same time, I felt left out. I felt that the mural wasn't telling us the whole story. It was telling us a part of the story and that it needed an update. So I found a reproduction of the mural, and then I drafted the main components of that mural, the main compositional components in all the machinery in the factory, and I inserted all these images of my family members here working. Or really, they're not really working. They kind of just hanging out. And then there was this big family tree concept. Oh, I should say that I didn't come to that idea right away. I saw the mural, as I mentioned, at the Detroit Institute of Art, and I thought it was cool. And then I went out to hang out with my family and ate great food and had fun, and that was it. And I didn't think about making art about it until months later, and then it just hit me. And I realized that I needed to know what my family tree looked like, and I needed to know my place in it. And then there was this idea of Diego leaving out this, this other bigger American history, and all these ideas were just swimming. So I finally realized I had to make the mural. And when I realized I had to make it, I realized I had to make it huge. So these are 8-foot by 4-foot blocks of MDF wood. I'm carving out all of the main gears and cylinders and forms that I saw repeated in that mural so that I can ink this up and print it and then collage that. So that's me collaging the mural together, and then I'm putting in portraits of my family members, because again, this is a way for me to get to know this side of my family. So I'm stalking them on Facebook. I'm grabbing screenshots. I'm calling them, texting them, can I use this photo? If someone posts a photo on Facebook, it's not always the best photo to use for art, because people are not thinking about art when they're taking the photos, right? It's a lot of kissy lips and stuff. But I knew they thought they was cute in the photos. So I was like, okay, well, at least that's a good start. So I started to use a lot of these like Facebook or Instagram photos in the work. And it really gave me a way to like continue the conversation and introduce to my family what I do. So this became the mural. This is, it's pretty big. It's like 38 feet long by 17 feet high. And I needed it to be that big because I wanted it to reflect Diego's mural, not one for one. I didn't need it to be the exact same size, but I needed us to be reminded of all of the ambition of that mural. And then I also felt like I really wanted to show my family, hey, this is what I do. This is what I'm capable of doing, and it was a tribute. Oh, let me go back. There's a sneaky self-portrait in here, too. Hold on. It's like right in here. I wasn't going to put myself in there at first because, to me, it wasn't about me. But then it only made sense at the end. Oh, I should also say, in terms of the family tree idea, what I was thinking was that I needed some structure here to help me understand all of the familiar relationships. So my grandma's in the middle here, dropping the motor. She had her first 4 McDonald's. That's my dad right there. And then she remarried Mr. Macy and had 10 more. And then finally, Paul Green, the baby, in her 3rd marriage. And then these are all of the cousins and nephews and nieces down here. That's my niece, Desiree, holding the car door. So again, continuing some of these same images and iconography that I sort of captured from Diego's gestures in the mural, and then kind of finding new ways to, bridge that with my language as well. There's these flowers. These flowers are now Michigan wildflowers. So Michigan is prairie land after all. So there's all these wildflowers popping up where in areas where the industry was, where there was factory buildings and major Art Deco buildings that have collapsed, and the land is reclaiming it. So this is some sculptural work that's also part of that same show at the Welland Museum. This is a sculpture here called Auntie Grandma. This is about two women in my family. My grandma, who had 15 kids, so there's 15 branches here for each of her kids, and then my Aunt Ree, who when she was 18 years old, moved all of her younger siblings from Memphis to Detroit on her own. And then these are tribal masks that I'm making from cubits of wood, and they're based on different West African tribal forms. So that DNA search that Paige mentioned in the Facebook message, when I did that DNA test, I think I did Ancestry.com, and I forgot that they keep your DNA in a bank, and then if someone else submits DNA that's similar, then they pair you together, they match you up. That's not something that I had considered when I was doing it. I was really just doing it to understand what were the African countries that I could connect my lineage to. And West Africa came up predominantly there. So I looked at some of those tribal forms, and then I was thinking about my lineage more contemporaneously to relatives that are working in the auto plants in Detroit, and these kind of welding masks that they would wear to protect themselves. So I was thinking about identity again, but in that collapse of time, if you collapse time, what happens with these two different masks of two totally different functions? The welding mask is to protect the worker, which often hides their face and their identity in doing so. And then the African tribal tradition, which is about conjuring an identity to be performed in a public space or in a private ceremony. So merging those two, they're sort of hybrid mask forms. And the other thing I was thinking about, I don't know if this is changing, but when I was in school, we were taught that Picasso invented abstraction. And that Picasso invented abstraction and cubism because he found this African mask form and he admired it, and that was the way. So it was always head scratching to me. And I thought, well, how did he invent it if it existed? Right? And so what I'm thinking about here is reclaiming abstraction as an African form in a way by making these masks out of cubits is sort of a reference to Picasso's cubism. So I'm sort of using these cubes of wood in order to structure the mask form. In a way, that's kind of like one of those art nerd inside things, but we need those too. Those are fun. Oh, you can see there's some marks here. These are Art Deco patterns. I found these all over the buildings and architecture in Detroit, and was really interested about location and the city and how we can't separate our bodies and our identities from the locations that we inhabit and the spaces that we work in, the spaces that we build, how they in turn kind of build us also. So also reclaiming that design form also as part of this identity here. And you'll notice that the mask is charred. So the last stage I'm doing with these masks is that I'm taking a torch and introducing fire to them. And I think I was thinking about a few things. Some of it was the actual labor that would happen with a welding mask where there's a welding torch and trying to replicate that activity. And then also just thinking about how I don't, in a traditional context, the African mask is danced in a ceremony, and that's when it's finished, that's when it's completed. And I don't know that ceremony. I'm disconnected from that tradition. So for me, introducing the fire was almost a way of relinquishing control and letting the fire take its own, make its own form from this work and have its own way with it. And in some ways, I kind of created my own ceremony around that. Oh, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, we'll have Esther and Yashua join us up here. Oh, Esther's already on it. I got you. Yeah, me too. So we'll
Hi.
proceed with some questions. Does anybody have a question? Okay.
Hello, question for Yashua. So your process of printmaking and collage strikes me as being very much about construction. And then also your ideas about construction of identity and labor parallel that very well. So I was wondering if you could talk about the relationship between like process and ideas and sort of how those inform each other and how maybe that's evolved for you.
Yeah, I love that. Great question. Yeah, I'm thinking about the way that identity is constructed and also how that construction isn't always solved, isn't always fixed, right? It isn't always solid, that it can be fluid, flexible, and often fragmented, right? So for me, collage works really well as a method to portray a kind of gesture of like wanting to build identity, needing to build identity, and in some ways still exposing those sort of interesting seams and slippages where identity isn't fully formed or fully rested. So I like the way that collage can be a proposal for a solved image, but it can also be very honest about its vulnerability, is like it comes from scraps. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is a question for both of you. Both of your work deals with materiality or the gallery space or an interaction in the gallery space. Is there a time when it has been a detriment to the concept or aided in the concept in general?
I think if it did, I just wouldn't do it. No, I mean, in terms of like landscape, I can't say that it would be detriment. I guess I don't, like, how extreme do you mean detrimental? Like, would it hurt or?
Would it take away, basically? Yeah.
Not for me so far. I think if I thought anything would take away from what I want, then I would pull back in some way. Because you can go too far. I mean, people can gloss over it real quick if it's too much. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Same question. Oh. Yeah, I think I know what you mean as far as I think that sometimes a concession can happen on an artist's behalf that would determine or in response to the site that the art is seen in, right? And alone in our studios, we don't need to make any concession because there's no audience and there's no system or structure around the thing. So there's a lot more freedom in that sense. But I tend to think that when there's something to lose, there's also something to gain. Meaning that if you move an art object out of your studio into, say, a white cube gallery space where, maybe it changes the way the object looks or functions, that you as the artist can now make new decisions about how to use that to your advantage in the art. Because I do think the site matters, the location of the art object or experience matters, and it can, of course, change the reading of the work. Yeah, but I'm the same way. I don't think about, like, if there was something I felt like was going to really undermine the work, I'm not interested. It's all about the work's integrity first. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello, hello. Both of you, thank you very much for your lecture. This is a question for Yashua. You explained that you spoke on masculinity within your art. Can you talk about how your view or your doing of your art had changed? Because art is very masculine and feminine in that definition sense. So could you speak a little bit more on?
Yeah, sure. So I think for me, like, I've used my art to really interrogate my own ideas about my own identity. And art's always been that tool for me because it's a place that I can be, like, the most honest and also a place where I'm confident. So for me, I think I've always sort of challenged notions of masculinity that I saw being fed to me, whether that was by friends or media. And my art was, for a long time, was sort of a tool to, like, cut through some of that stuff and challenge it and see where I felt I existed in some of that. And I think my art maybe still does that. It's just not, for me, that's not, like, no longer is that, like, at the forefront of the investigation. Yeah. Did that answer the question?
Oh, I have a question back here. Excuse me.
I have a question for Esther. I guess I share an interest in the image as an object, and I was curious in the work that you showed, the role of the cyanotype as a very ephemeral process, and then kind of using the specificity of an archival inkjet print, and then pushing against that archival impulse of photography by introducing different chemicals and stuff. So I was curious what your thoughts on preservation are in practices of photography and within your own work, pushing against that.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I have no care if my work outlives me. I don't, if it lasts 100 years, great. If it doesn't, I kind of don't really, I don't know, I just don't think about making the most archival thing. Everything changes all the time, and I'm okay with that, which is why in some of those pieces that I made with the oven cleaner or whatnot, they continue to change now with all the chemicals mixing and things like that. So I think that just land evolves, the pieces can evolve. But that being said, cyanotype is fairly archival as well, and they're made in such a way that if they're taken care of, they'll last. But I don't really think about that when I make necessarily. I just kind of make and then muck it all up. And then if it stays that way, great. If it doesn't, then it evolves just like everything else.
Any other questions? I have I'm trying to think of it as a question. It's kind of a comment, but it's also a question. For Esther, I couldn't help but think of your story in the beginning of when you were talking about your grandfather and the land that he's leaving you and the responsibility of that. I don't know how deep that is, but you have a responsibility. And also the way that you're just talking now about your landscape images and how that legacy, it could last 100 years or they could last forever, maybe not. And I'm just curious to know a little bit more if you've entertained or thought about the connection between those two ideas.
Yeah, it does seem pretty conflicting, I guess. I think that I don't know, it's an object that, isn't gonna live on, or maybe it will, I don't know. But I think that, this land that will one day be mine and my siblings, I don't know if that will stay. And so I think that the question of like, well, maybe my work will last, if in a physical sense, and even digital files, like who knows if those will last, for however long. But I guess I haven't really thought about those two things in correlation. But I think that what's important to me and how I make, I don't know, it's just like right now. And then if I can make it archival in a sense of like, I can show it and induce ideas, and maybe then that's what's left rather than a physical piece. Maybe it's just a thought process and a feeling of something rather than an art object. Because I had a friend in grad school who literally said to me, all we're doing is putting more objects out into the world as artists. Like that's what we're doing. And whether those live 1,000 years or 5 minutes, I don't know, I just don't think about that. It's not the forefront of when I make or what I make or how I make, so.
Is that like a rejection of it for you, or is it just not where you're at?
Yeah, it's just not like my, it's not like an important role for me in the work. I'm not sure that, I don't, maybe I don't think that my ideas are that important either. Maybe I'm slightly self-deprecating and like, oh, maybe in 50 years from now, someone else doesn't need to think like this. I don't know, because that floats in my mind too. Like artists are, my ideas are so important that I have to make a physical object of it, and then everyone else gets to look at it. It's a really, not selfish, but it's like it's a thing that I'm placing importance on that I want other people to think is important. Yeah, I don't know. I don't feel like I answered your question.
No, no. It was a hard question because it's just kind of abstract, but I just was interested in that. And Yashua, I was interested in, I was thinking through the work that you made with the new family members that you found and putting them in this really imaginative context that was symbolic and iconic. And you were fighting kind of against this, not necessarily erasure, but just not inclusive, or not the whole story, as you said. And I'm curious about what the reaction of your family was to that, because I noticed your cousin is holding the car door, and you know it's not from a real historical image, but it's imagined, but it is symbolic. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about how you came to those conclusions and what their reaction was.
Yeah, thanks for that. One point of clarity that I forgot to mention about that very first image of me, young me, 7 years old, in the field. So that happened the first time I met that side of my family. So I met them when I was 7. My dad took me on a road trip to Michigan, and we met. But that only happened one time. And then I was like, did I even, as you grow up, you're like, did I fantasize that? Was that real? Yeah, so I forgot to mention that part, which is why that photo later of us all together in the same backyard was even more poignant. We're all like, yes, nah. I sort of forgot your question.
That's okay. It was about the redo of I think it was Diego Rivera's and your whole
No, they love it.
No,
I can't get rid of them now. Like they come to every show that I do. I did a show in Paris. I had 3 aunts and 5 cousins come. I did the Joan Mitchell residency in New Orleans. I had 7 family members show up. So they love it. They want to be more involved. Now that they kind of understand what I do, now they're sending me photos unsolicited. I'm like, I don't need this, Yeah, but it's great, and I think for them, like, we use the words like representation and you said erasure. I don't think they think of it that way. They don't even think of it like they have a whole different way of living out that and what it is for them, but they appreciate what I do, and they appreciate the voice that I'm giving to this part of history, and they want to be involved in any way they can. So I'm so grateful for that, because it could have went the whole other way. You know, we've heard stories of this almost exact thing where somebody does a DNA test or finds out, you know, this whole family member, and it goes a whole other way. I avoided this situation because I thought it would go a different way, but it just turned out to be amazing, and here we are. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other
Oh,
questions?
he got a question. He got a question right here.
Oh.
This is for Esther. I don't know if I've asked you this or not. I feel like I might have, but I'll ask it again. For your work on the household with the household cleaning products, how much of that did you like have an idea in your mind for how you wanted this to look, versus how much of it was just like playing and just like seeing what would happen?
Oh, it was total. I have no idea what's gonna happen. Let's just try it. I think out here in the parking lot, I had a bunch of tables set up, and I had like 10 prints, and I just like assembly line sprayed bleach or smeared laundry detergent, and I did it, you know, as many times as I could, but I had no idea what was going to happen. And sometimes the bleach would react in different ways with different like tones of ink, and so it was totally what happens. And then I like had to finish them in a certain way to make them somewhat stable, because the ink would just like peel off, and that was just gonna, like, I couldn't even show that because it would just disintegrate. So I had to like glue, or I like did a varnish or something on top and try to keep it just stable enough to show. But all of those are like, they're not behind glass, they're not behind any protectant. Which goes back to the archival question of, like, you know, they're completely exposed. They can evolve however they need to. And yeah. So yeah, total exploration. No plan whatsoever.
Thank you, Esther. Thank you, Yashua. Thanks, everybody. And we'll see you here at 8:45 tomorrow for our general orientation. Have a great night.